Captain Wayne Vacation Desperation is a fantastic indie boomer shooter that released back on November 25th, 2025. It's one of those games I had my eye on for a while now, and I picked it up recently and found myself having a very hard time putting it back down. If you look at even a few moments of gameplay, you can see what I mean. Fast, flashy combat, a distinct art style that has me smitten with just about every character design, and music that feels like the love child of Doom and Anton Blast. Beyond the presentation, it's just an amazing game to play, especially given where it draws inspiration from. It obviously wears its Pizza Tower and Anton Blast-esque visuals on its sleeve, but besides the obvious usage of the Doom engine and being a first-person shooter, it harkens to older boomer shooters as well. A harkening that I can't really compare to any boomer shooters in specifics because, don't tell anyone, but I haven't played too many old school shooters myself. Oh, I've played the original Doom a bit here and there, but you don't grow up in a household where shooter games are banned and the closest you have are the tank sections in Atlantis Square Pantis with much knowledge on what lies beyond E1 M1. My lack of contextual information now being apparent, I just want it to be known that Captain Wayne is really fucking good, and it has me kinda wanting to try some of those older shooters myself sometime. But we're not here to talk Dookie Nukie, so let's get this show on the road. The game starts with a tutorial that gives you all the basics you need to know. You have legs, so you can walk, jump, and kick. And stringing those last two together lets you do a jump kick, which will be your primary way of gaining and maintaining momentum throughout stages. Outside of movement, you can punch, shoot the shotgun, which is also your arm, and grab items in the environment like coconuts to fill up your gusto, your shield, or exploding barrels to launch at enemies. As you make your way through the tutorial and earn your sea legs, you quickly realize just how smooth everything is. Running and jump kicking to build up speed feels so good to do, and the sound design on your punches and shotgun feel, for lack of better words, explosive and punchy. And when water traversal is introduced, instead of being a hazard or an annoying slog to get through like in so many other games, you swim pretty fast and can dolphin jump out of the water to reach way higher heights than before. This is one of those games that gives you all the tools to get through levels from the offset, barring unlockable weapons later on, and tasks you with getting used to them and getting good. You're not some swabby or lowly lieutenant, you're a captain. And even if it takes a few levels to set in, the game will expect you to play like one when the time calls. But for now, it's time to exit the tutorial where the game proper starts with a cutscene that basically regurgitates the story summary you'd see on the Steam page. Vacation Desperation's plot isn't complicated and it's all the better for it. Captain Wayne has won a vacation to Orca Island, home of the legendary Orca Stone, and after having a quick run-in with the police, namely a face-to-face with Detective Steele, and by face-to-face I mean fist-to-face as Captain Wayne punches Steele off of the boat, Wayne goes back to gun with the Killer Whales, a mercenary group that has a bone to pick with him, leading into the first real level of the game, Keel Hall Compound. Keel Hall Compound is very simple and straightforward, giving you big open areas to experiment with movement, interspersed with small waves of enemies. Of the Killer Whales that this level introduces, you have your three basic gunners, wielding pistols, rifles, and shotguns respectively. All of them have different strengths and weaknesses that, when alone, make them pushovers. Together makes them at least a bit of a challenge. That isn't to say this level is difficult. I mean, it's the first real level of the game, that would be a little bit cruel, but the game sets the precedent right away that even with the weaker enemies, you should constantly be moving and gunning them down, prioritizing different targets depending on how far they are or how much health you have on you. Aside from the gun-touting bastards, you'll also tussle with bruisers. These big walking punch-out clones use their boxing gloves as shields that block a lot of damage, only putting them down when they're going in for the punch, which leaves them vulnerable to a swift kick. You can either waste a bunch of bullets brute forcing your way through their shield, or get close and risking punch to knock them out. Similarly to the gunners, they aren't too deadly on their own, but when taking out multiple at once or when they're in a crowd of muzzle flashes, they can be a bit troublesome. The level itself really isn't anything special. It's just an excuse to run, jump kick, and shoot your way through enemies while you're still getting the bearings on how Wayne handles, with the only real set pieces of note being this little boot camp that reminds you jump kicking will be necessary, and the part at the end where you blow up a submarine and launch yourself back to Captain Wayne's ship. And it's here we're introduced to the main antagonists of the game, Dinky, Professor Flats, and King. It's also here we get to see more of Captain Wayne as character and how he eclipses all three of them in memorability. This isn't a knock on the villains per se, they all work fine for what they are, it's just that Captain Wayne runs circles around them in terms of how much charm he has. He's basically Duke Nukem, but I like him more. He's loud, abrasive, rude, direct, but he never dips into being unlikable. Between his humor and voice work, you always want to see him succeed if just so he can live to fight another day. We find out that prior to this game, Wayne had ransacked one of King's cargo ships, stole his crown, and sold it for $30 at Shell City. So in seeking revenge, King shipnaps Wayne's ship to go to Orca Island and claim the Orca Stone for himself. But Wayne's like a cockroach and won't go down easy, leading us into the game's second level, Ballina Beach Beatdown. Here we see the game using the vacation theming to fuller effect, with this level taking place at a resort, starting off with a big open beach that's fun to speed around on, blow stuff up, before you make your way through the tight and crowded hallways on the inside. This level shows where the game is at its best, and that's when you're speeding through environments, mowing down enemies, and doing your best not to get hit. This gets amplified with the introduction of the chain gun and boom brew. The chain gun is fantastic for clearing hordes of weaker enemies or soloing out the big guys who show up later on, and you gotta understand, the boom brew is a great grenade. I'm just dumb and didn't realize you could charge how far you threw the grenade until like level 3 or 4. So the background footage of me missing a lot of shots with the grenades is explained away by me being an absolute idiot. The level's layout is really fun and memorable too, having you go through hotel rooms and elevators, up to the wide open suite where you've got to handle waves of enemies, the secret laundry room that ends with you grabbing the golden access card before being shot back out into the beach and reenacting a war film with these dive-bombing birds. You also find a secret in the form of this little section where you eat a sandwich that fully cements Captain Wayne's transformation into Jotaro Kujo. Every level will have a small handful of secrets, which usually amount to a little goodie or a humorous visual gag. They aren't required for beating the game or anything, but they're great ways to have you replaying the already fun levels to poke around and find them. Next up is Mount Moby Mayhem, another pretty fun level where you explore an underground lab owned by the killer whales in their effort to find the Orca Stone before you can. Now that you've gotten a grip on how to pilot Wayne, the game ratchets up the difficulty a bit, introducing new enemies like Masons and Stranglerfish. Masons are these big cinderblock guys who throw bricks at you or spin Crash Bandicoot style if you're up close. They have a lot more health than the average Joe you've been fighting. And unlike those regular enemies, they don't go flying backwards when you kick them. Not to mention, the bricks they throw deal a hearty chunk of damage, so they tend to go at the top of your priority totem pole. Stranglerfish, on the other hand, are quite a bit easier to deal with. You may question why that is when Wayne himself hasn't learned to fly yet, but it's because one well-placed boom brew takes them out instantly. However, if you're out of boom brews, they're not that bad to tussle with, especially since they don't move very much in the air, leaving them very open to shotgun blasts. Traversing through Mount Moby itself will have you exploring caves, labs, volcanic cliffs, and vats of green. Here's where I'm going to praise the visuals some more, because there's just something about the Source Engine-esque textured environments, coupled with the cartoony sprites on top of that makes for a visual style I really love. I'm fully aware some of that charm comes packaged with the GZ Doom engine the game was built upon, but where games like Doom and Quake strive for semi-realistic pixel art in the enemies and first-person views, this game as a whole almost feels like a point-and-click adventure game from the 90s with its approach on character design and sprite work. It's such a bizarre mix of clashing styles that just shouldn't work, and if you were to describe it without looking at it, you'd imagine something along the lines of Gary's Mod in terms of weird visual mismatch, but the game has such a high confidence in how it pulls it off that it makes it all work so seamlessly. Getting to the end of Mount Moby Mayhem has us coming face to ghostly face with Davy Jones, who warns us that the killer whales are tapping into forces beyond their understanding, and tasks us with stopping them. This of course means to set off the volcano this lab is built around and get the hell out. I mean, I'm like 90% sure Wayne could survive being blasted out of a volcano, just look at him, but that would waste precious time as we see our ship way off yonder and have to go get it. Beach Beluga Blues follows and has us blowing through a small town owned by Dinky, 1/3 of the main antagonists. If you haven't guessed by now, every level introduces some new mechanic in the form of new weapons, new enemies, or in this level, both. But this level also has the distinction of being the first speed bump in the difficulty curve. I won't blame you for dying on it, what with it having slightly more cramped rooms and awkward platforming that makes combat less challenging and more annoying at times. This is not an overall indictment on the game's quality, it's just a testament to how great the rest of the game is that a level like this misses the mark ever so slightly, and spoiler, it's not going to be the last level I take umbrage with. Well, I just blew through this room of enemies, I guess I'll go grab this barrel. What the fuck?! Yeah, the game takes some small dips into spooky territory, and this is your first look at that with these zombie barrels. This is a bit of a cruel joke to play on the player, giving them explosive barrels to use throughout the first hour or so of the game, only to pull a Freddy Fazbear on you, but a cruel joke is still a joke, and thus, it's really funny. After that, you're also introduced to the Sunken Smashers. One actually showed up at the end of Beach Ballina Beatdown as a bit of a mini-boss before being introduced here as a regular enemy. Why didn't I introduce it there? I forgot. They're big, mean, and fast, so keeping away from them is the ideal strategy. Pictured here is the less ideal strategy. Our priorities have shifted yet again. If you see a Sunken Smasher, you need to take them out yesterday, or get to higher ground where they can't reach you. They will dismantle you in seconds flat. And this is where the game stops politely asking you to do better and starts demanding. If Masons were giving you trouble with their 300 health, Sunken Smashers will give you hell with their 1,200 health, giving them the prestigious honor of being the sink or swim moment for this game. They aren't the hardest enemy of the game to deal with, not quite, but once you know how to take them on consistently, you'll know you're prepared for what the game still has in store. And what it has in store is the first mini-boss, Earl. Now, despite that sounding like he'd be tougher than the Sunken Smashers, he really isn't. Yes, he has more health and does a lot more damage, but unlike the Sunken Smashers or other sore spot enemies later on, Earl just kinda stands still while firing at you, meaning you can easily circle him like a shark and go in for the kill. And your reward for the trials and tribulations of the first part of this level is a new weapon, the cannon. Now I could go into the intricacies and nuances of this weapon, its use cases and its downsides, but I don't have to. Captain Wayne has just hoisted a goddamn cannon onto his shoulder and is about to show how the average man is not as sturdy as an entire ship. It also goes without saying that as this is one of the stronger weapons in the game, ammo doesn't show up all too often, so spend it wisely. But also it's a goddamn cannon. I would not blame you at all for wanting to smite a simple shotgunner off the face of the earth with it. Reaching the end of the level, we get a cutscene officially introducing us to Dinky as we prepare to square off against him in the first real boss fight of the game. We're then confronted by Detective Stanley Steele, who has been hot on our trail as we segue into the second real boss fight of the game. Spoiler again for later on, but Stanley's boss fight is the best one in the game. I'll get to the issues I have with the others when we get to them, but just know they don't apply to his. You're stuck on a small arena going head to head with the detective, and the best way I can describe it is feeling like a genuine one-on-one with another player in an old school arena shooter. For the first half, he slides around the arena trying to pop up and shoot you, and it's not too hard to avoid him and sneak shots in yourself. That is, until the second phase where the gloves are off and he starts firing boom brews of his own. And if you're like me, you're going to die to this phase a few times because we're both stupid. My best advice is to hound on him all through the first phase, but when his boom brews start flying, just stay the hell away. You have more than enough room to maneuver and dodge around, and it's not worth it to try and go in for shots when he's going off like a New Year's celebration. Just wait a little bit. This boss fight teaches you to have just a little bit of patience sometimes. You don't always need to go running guns blazing. Given how relatively short the preceding stage was, his boss fight is a fun and unique change of pace that doesn't overstay its welcome. After the fight, Stanley calls a truce with Wayne so they can work together to stop the killer whales, and suddenly a giant evil temple appears. This was not on the brochure. While Stanley runs off to see if he can find any weaknesses in the killer whale's defense, Captain Wayne hears the voice of Davy Jones urging him to explore the temple, leading us in the 5th level, Sanctuary of the Ancients. Remember how I said last level dipped its toe into being spooky? Well, Sanctuary of the Ancients strips naked and dives into the deep end, as the level opens up with a portal to a strange hellscape dimension. No music, and corpses of killer whale mercenaries everywhere, cluing you in to what kind of level it is. After poking around for a bit, the music finally kicks in with the introduction of the newest enemies, the Laguni, and it really tells you what kind of level it is. Laguni are terrifying to deal with. Faster than most other baddies you face, claws that can shred through your health bar, and a line of sight attack that can magically bring your health all the way down to 1 if you're caught in it. Not to mention the eerie locale you first see them in, their high-pitched screech, and the fact you start this level only with their shotgun and fists makes their introduction a very strong one. My underwear is thoroughly soiled. These devs thought of everything. The level itself is one of the most visually striking in the whole game, having you mow down enemies through twisting dreamlike corridors that fold in on each other in ways that don't quite make sense, adding on to the strange and eerie factor of the bright colored lights and the textures using a few more eyeballs than I remember the usual temple having. All of the killer whales here are translucent, so combined with the corpses at the beginning means for some really grim implication of where you are and is a great case of environmental storytelling. The level as a whole has fun set pieces to run around in, switching between the dark interiors of this old sanctuary to the large, almost liminal feeling empty plains, the giant pyramid you fight around inside of, and it's here in the pyramid where the game really goes for being an homage to Doom with its visual style and general layout. It's a bit of a confusing maze of interconnected rooms that work like little battle arenas, and I would like it a lot more if the autosave checkpoint wasn't back outside of the temple, but that is made up for in the final chunk of the level where you explore a flooded map that feels like a cross between a courtyard and a fish tank. No matter what it reminds you of, I just want to eat the colored rocks. The game still doesn't let up with keeping you on your toes, constantly having you check around every corner lest a living barrel or Laguni catch you off guard, keeping the whole thing tense and making run-ins with even weak enemies a momentary oh shit heart attack while your brain has to catch up with your eyes. Once you've slain your way through the sanctuary and collected all 3 keys, you open up the sealed tomb of Thunder Dave, the spirit of all things lightning. He's technically a new weapon, but he works more like a power-up that you get every once in a while. A big room nuke that just clears everything out after Thunder Dave says some little humorous thing about lightning striking twice, or how much he's yellow, or something, I don't know, I kinda stopped paying attention. Once we escape the temple, we're on our way to Blubco Industries, another fun level set inside a factory. This level introduces the final normal weapon of the adventure, the Cell Shocker. It's your railgun. You can shoot things that are far away, or things that are all lined up together. Your choice. It also introduces the Jolting Jerry, another flying enemy similar to Slaughterfish, but with a far-reaching laser eye that explodes. Just like Slaughterfish though, they can be taken down with one swift boom brew, but this is easier said than done, as they're prone to flying in all sorts of weird patterns. And despite these two new additions, there's not much to say about this level overall. It involves you powering up a super laser by going to 4 side paths and hitting buttons, with only half of them being all too memorable. Specifically, the yellow path because of how very scary it is, and the green path for having the single best piece of dialogue in the entire game.
Alright, what the fuck is this one, man? You can't tell me this is a real fucking factory machine. Like, damn. Oh, honey, how was work? Oh, yeah, no, it was fine. Long day at the factory making purple. The fuck is this shit? God damn.
Outside of that, the level is just okay. The end has you rescuing Detective Steele after fighting waves of enemies, and this is where I kind of started getting a little tired of these arena fights. Like I said earlier, the game is at its most fun when it points you down a hallway full of enemies and tells you, hey, make sure that the only thing left moving at the end of this is you picking the bullets from your teeth. So having to slow down and just lap around a room like a cat with the zoomies, I mean, it's still fun, but just not nearly as fun as the regular parts of the game. Luckily, there's only like a couple more instances of this before the end of the game, so it's not that big of a deal, just something to keep in mind. I will take this chunk of the script to talk about the music in this game and how stellar it is. Save for Captain Wayne's theme, Raise Anchor, none of them get repeated in the levels, and each level has a unique set of music. From the dreamlike psychedelia of a Drestria binge in the tutorial, Detective Steele's bouncy and jazz-filled boss theme, to the sinister undertones of Waters of the Outbound, every track in this game fits their stage flawlessly, and it's joined the ranks of video game soundtracks I casually listen to when I'm working on scripts. The best song in the game by far is the aforementioned Raise Anchor. This adrenaline-pumping track filled to the brim with electric guitar and synths that sells Wayne's destructive personality. You don't create a character like Captain Wayne, a madcap ballistic pirate with a shotgun for an arm whose primary objective is to turn an entire army of mercenaries into buckets of chum because they jacked his boat in vacation, without giving him an equally unhinged theme song. When this kicks in the couple of times it does throughout the game, you know that the section you're about to play is going to be amazing. Once finished at Blubco Industries, Stanley and I head to King's Court, a level taking place at King's Castle. Right away, it does a great job of setting up this as the second to last level, with the track that I can't even begin to pronounce playing as you rampage through. The first leg of the level has you on the outskirts of the castle, fighting off just about every enemy type you've encountered before as you find the main switches to open up the castle door. And it's once you're in the castle that you come across the most annoying enemy of the game, the Squires. They're these obnoxious little robots that shoot slow tracking projectiles at you, and they have nearly the amount of health that Masons do. They're only so annoying because you typically encounter a bunch at once, and with all of them being far away and being able to see you long before you can go in for the kill, meaning you'll have a bunch of flying projectiles come your way before you can even start to go at them. I only found out after beating the game that you can apparently shoot down their laser balls, but A, that wouldn't have helped all too much for how many there are, and B, how the hell would I figure that out, that I can shoot them down when it doesn't look much different to any other enemy attack? Luckily, like most small things I hate, like children, a bottle to the head shuts them up fast. Once inside the castle, you have to hit several switches darted around to turn on a massive spiral staircase. And if I'm gonna be real, it's just become a weaker version of Blubco Industries, where you have to run around different hallways turning on switches for a thing to access the last part of the level. The only parts I really remember was the tower that got filled up with water reminded me that I could dolphin jump out of the water, which hasn't really come up in gameplay all too often, and this room that was a nice callback to Beach Beluga Blues. Otherwise, it was kinda forgettable. It's great in the moment, as the rest of the game is, but if I wasn't watching back the footage, I wouldn't really be able to recall much of the layout from memory. The main part I really remember was the final chunk of the level, and that's because it was frustrating. Here you get a big room full of respawning ammo and health and have to face off against a gauntlet of every enemy type without any breaks. On paper, this sounds like it should be an amazing set piece to test your knowledge of the game thus far, but it instead feels like sensory overload. What with the shadowy room, the weird architecture, and enemies spawning without much of a visual indication as to where they are until you're getting smacked with their attacks. It could really just be a me thing though. I don't outright hate these arenas, but it's just the fact that they're so small and cramped that makes them so annoying to me. After taking on King's deadliest forces, you head up to the topmost part of his castle to face off against him. And I hate to continue being a bit of a downer, but this is the weakest boss fight in the whole game. Even weaker than Dinky's, and his was a joke one, but at least that joke was funny. It comes down to being one of my least favorite archetypes of boss fights, ones where the boss is invincible for a very good chunk of it and you have to wait for an opening to do any amount of damage. I'm biased here, I prefer boss fights where your skill determines length and how quickly it can be beaten. Detective Steel's boss fight being a perfect example of that. It doesn't help that when he is invincible, King's not doing anything interesting. He's either flying in a circle around the arena shooting projectiles that will never hit you, or he's just watching you take on more waves of enemies? This was really unnecessary. We just had that gauntlet of every enemy type right before this, so to have the big dramatic showdown with King constantly being interrupted with, oh hey, you gotta kill all these enemies to move on to the next phase of the boss fight, was just really anticlimactic. And don't get it twisted, despite me saying the arena fights are weaker than the usual game, they're still fun in their own right. I was just hoping for something, unique for this boss fight. The big bad of the game, or at least what's been set up as the big bad of the game. And at the very least, the fight ends on a more climactic note with King teleporting around and sending out massive waves of energy that force you to keep moving or explode, before just kinda standing there and letting me shove several cannonballs down his gullet. With King dethroned, there's one last piece of business that needs taken care of, and that's Professor Flats making off the Orca Stone in a hot air balloon. Wayne and Steel fired themselves out of a cannon at it, leading to the last level of the game, Hydrogen Humpback. As soon as the level starts, a timer on screen starts. What happens when it goes off? I don't know, maybe Wayne's heart explodes, but you're never gonna catch me letting it hit 0. Hydrogen Humpback is one last gauntlet rush of enemies, but unlike the previous ones that stuck you in one area, you're making your way from one end of the airship to the other, which heavily alleviates those issues I had. It's an exhilarating thrill ride of the level, the timer ensuring you can't really stop to look around or catch your breath, you just gotta keep moving forward and don't look back. And once you've made it to the end, you square off against the true final boss, Professor Flats and his giant mech suit. He betrayed King and is planning on taking the Orca Stone for himself, but not before riddling you with holes. This is the second best fight in the game behind Detective Steele's. Professor Flats sits behind a shield throwing all sorts of attacks at you, and you have to take down these pillars that open up side rooms for you to slowly shut down his machine. It's a fun mix of combat and movement, as the arena has a lot of funky geometry and even a lot of water under it to swim in, combined with the Professor's mech having all sorts of attacks like a giant flamethrower, lasers, and missiles you can shoot out of the sky. It was a lot of fun taking potshots at the pillars while ducking for cover, but similarly to King's fight, Flats summons enemies to slow you down. But unlike that fight, they aren't required killing to progress the fight. I definitely would have preferred just a straight-on one-on-one fight against him, as his attacks are already fun and challenging to avoid, but since you don't need to kill any of the enemies to progress the fight, they don't bog it down all too much. Once all the pillars are destroyed and his base is falling apart, Professor Flats leaves his podium and attempts to squash you himself, but you get a power boost in the form of the Orca Stone, giving you a giant laser beam to make this the most climactic battle in the whole game. And then I accidentally jumped in the water and realized he couldn't reach me down there, so I just shot him from there. What? Playing fair's been off the table. He stole my boat. After the battle, Flats is flattened, and it triggers the whole base to explode. So we have to do one more run back through Hydrogen Humpback, but with two major differences. You're going backwards, and you get to use the Orca Stone, and this thing ain't playing around. It was obviously great at shredding Flats' health in the fight, but it goes through enemies like a hot shotgun arm through butter, giving you a great power fantasy send-off worthy of the great Captain Wayne. With King and his army no longer a threat to Orca Island, the Orca Stone returns to its resting place, and Wayne gets a reward in the form of all the gold King had stolen falling out of his airship and into Wayne's ship. And with that, it's a farewell to Captain Wayne and his story, as he sails away. There is a final cutscene that leads into the game's side mode, Riptide Rampage, but that's a shanty to sing some other time. If you couldn't tell from me dedicating a whole video to this game, I loved it. It's not perfect, it's not long, but by God does it set out to do what it wants and does it amazingly. Captain Wayne is a masterclass in simple but effective game design, cranking up the difficulty as it goes on, but without ever feeling so overwhelming that you get burnt out by it. I can't promise it'll be to everyone's taste in the same way a lot of indie darlings in its ranks are, but if you have even an inkling of an interest in the game, I highly recommend it. Hell, there's a demo for it that takes you through the tutorial in first level. If you aren't having a blast by the end of Keel Hall Compound, this game might not be for you, but it definitely was for me. And I'll be sure to keep my eyes to the horizon for Captain Wayne's next adventure, wherever it may take me.